You know, it's going to be Thanksgiving pretty soon, and not long after that, we're going to be singing Christmas carols. Now, I was working along to try to get my speech going. I was having trouble, and a refrain all of a sudden was going through my brain, and it would come, and all of a sudden, what was happening was I was hearing the hopes and fears of all the years. It's in the old little town of Bethlehem. It's the end of the last verse. The hopes and fears of all the years. And that's all. It would end and start right there. And I began to realize that this time frame that we're dealing with encompasses the most intense hopes and the most intense fears that you can find anywhere in history. And those hopes start at Shakamaxon, and they end at Paxton. And so I broke some of the rules. This is not what Deb asked me to talk about. Shakamaxon was the most remembered of several treaties negotiated by William Penn with the Lenape and the Conestoga Indians. Can you hear me all right? Taken together, they succeeded in cementing a remarkable period of good relations and high hopes with the Indians. Benjamin West captured the spirit of these treaties in his famous painting, The Treaty at Shakamaxon. Although frequently criticized for inaccuracy and being too idealistic in many of his details, the painting does succeed in capturing the essence of hope and mutual trust which William Penn believed could prevail if given a chance. Now, to fully comprehend how bold these people were, you've got to remember that only 6 years before this happened, 6 years, the terrible slaughter of King Philip's War in Massachusetts with its gruesome toll on both Indians and colonists. And then William Penn has got the nerve to come over here and try to start a new colony based on these principles that he took out of the Sermon on the Mount. Notable success of these treaties surprised many skeptics and gave great encouragement to all of the participants, the Indian as well as the colonists, and ushered in the next period in Pennsylvania history what many historians have labeled the 50 years of peace. It was by all reasonable standards a remarkably peaceable domain. Those high hopes for happiness and prosperity looked as though they would prevail. But it was not to prevail indefinitely. One of the saddest ironies of American history is the story of the collapse of William Penn's dream. Starting with so much hope and showing so much early promise, it was not to survive more than 2 generations. The flood of new colonists with their large families guaranteed a constantly increasing demand for more and more land by a people growing steadily further away from the ideals that had been the very foundation blocks of Penn's unique plan. Occasional minor land disputes and petty thievery escalated to drunken brawls, horse thievery, major land frauds, murders, revenge murders. The goodwill and mutual trust and high hopes of the 1680s and 90s plummeted to mutual distrust, fear, and hatred by 1740. One of the land frauds during that period, of them, the most infamous was the one known to history as the walking purchase. William Penn himself had agreed to the original terms. Let's see, Deb, have I got a pointer on here? Yeah, okay. Uh-oh. That shouldn't have happened. Come back. Come back. Worked. Hey. Stay there. Since I did this, I then took that map, and I'm sorry I didn't do it fast enough, but if any of you want to look at this later, I took an ordinary Pennsylvania road map, and you can see the color coding on here. I redid the portions on that, and it makes more sense. But I think that you can figure out. You see the Delaware River going there from Philadelphia, working its way up. It finally goes through the Delaware Water Gap at Stroudsburg. I hope that makes sense to most of you. That's quite a ways north. Well, down at the very bottom, just above the word Trenton, I don't know whether I dare to try to move this around or not. I think I'm going to be too clumsy. Forget it. Yeah, forget it. Just a little bit upriver from Trenton, you see that shaded area? It comes over from the river just a little bit and then goes parallel up to Tohoikin Creek. That's the area that when William Penn was first here, the Indians and Penn discussed and agreed upon as to a agreed purchase. And then it lay dormant for a good many years. Oh, thanks, Dad. Yeah. How about that? Now, if I just had a steady hand, so that line right through there, that line was already established. That's what Penn and his people already owned by legal treaty. But going north, the plan that was agreed upon was they would go up the Delaware River to Tohickon Creek, turn and follow Tohickon Creek as far as a man could walk in a day and a half from the beginning point. And at that point, they'd strike a line back to the original. That was it. But for 37 years, the whites didn't claim the land. And finally, in 1737, they decided they wanted their land, and so. But now there was a big argument as to what land amounted to. They now said that they wanted all the way up to here. This river, by the way, coming down through here and making an abrupt bend right there, that's the Lehigh River. That's present-day Easton right there, and here's Bethlehem. That's present-day Allentown. And here's Easton, and right in the middle is Bethlehem. So this is today one of the most populated parts of Pennsylvania. The area that's in crosshatch, it's called Nodimustown. Nodimus was the principal Delaware leader. They had their very principal town in there, and plus many other towns, and that was their favorite hunting ground. Okay, now William Penn's grandsons, known as the proprietors, they said, we're going to take all this land as far as, and what they did was they cleared a path, and they hired almost a professional speed walker. In fact, they had a horse with him, and the horse carried all of his supplies, and they kept the horse on a trot. Now, this guy never ran, but he walked so fast for a day and a half that at the end of his allotted time, a day and a half, he was way up through the Delaware Water Gap and going up the Delaware on the other side. And their claim was, we now get all of the land over to the Lehigh River north of the Tohickon Creek. Well, that included their most important lands, their chief village and all their other. Well, they complained. Of course they complained. We can say that by then the ideals of mutual trust had given way to land-grabbing greed. So blatant, this was obvious cheating on a scale so blatant as to constitute grand larceny, and the Lenni Lenape objected strenuously. Several villages, including their principal village and their choice hunting grounds, were within this new boundary. They could not, in their wildest imagination, conceiving any prior chief ever having agreed to giving up these villages, let alone about 5 times the original territory, right in the very heart of their homeland. So complain they did, loud and fiercely, but to deaf ears. The proprietors knew that the Lenni Lenape were subservient to the Iroquois, 5 nations, and the Iroquois were in turn increasingly dependent for their very survival upon a strong trading relationship at Albany. So the Iroquois chiefs from the council fire at Onondaga were used to enforce the fraudulent terms of the walking purchase, now called the running walk by the Lenni Lenape. By the way, I'm going to use the terms Lenni Lenape and Delaware interchangeably here. If any